600 of your closest friends. So it should be a nice time. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to do, we're on the main branch of the Chicago River right now. When we push off, we are going to head east to the point where the river meets Lake Michigan. We'll turn around, we'll head back on the main branch. We'll go to the point where the river splits off north and south, and we'll go down the south branch. We'll visit the tallest building in Chicago, the Willis Tower. It used to be called the Sears Tower for everybody that's in Chicago that still thinks of it as Sears Tower, but then we'll come back. Saturdays are always real busy here on the lake. We got kayakers, a lot of whom it's their first time on a kayak, and they're in a busy waterway with a lot of big boats, so it's always a little tense. But just to give you a little bit of an idea where we are right now, this is actually a very historic part of town. Just the other side of the bridge is where Fort Dearborn once stood. And Fort Dearborn was the fort that the federal government built to protect the settlers here, the first settlers here in the early 1800s. It was built in 1803, burned down during the War of 1812, but then it was reconstructed. Stayed active again until 1837 when we were chartered as a city. Just forward of the boat here on this side of the river, you may have noticed a bust of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable at the top of the stairs there. He was our first non-native settler. Back in the 1790s, he had a very successful trading post at what is right now Michigan Avenue in the Chicago River. He was a Haitian man of African and Caribbean descent. Back then, all the stuff wasn't there. It was basically a dirt road, a couple of buildings, and a whole lot of prairie land back there. As we push off, though, I always like to talk about this building right here. This is the London Guarantee and Accident Building, a 1923 building by Alfred Alschuler. Started out as the headquarters for the London Guarantee and Accident Insurance Company, but about 2 years ago it was converted into a luxury hotel. If you look all the way at the top there, that little structure at the top that sort of looks like a temple up there, it's called the Tempe Eddy. And if you're feeling very romantic and you want to propose to your significant other, the hotel there has a program. They will take you up to the Tempe Eddy. There's a kneeler under the Tempe Eddy. You can get down on your knees and do it the right way. Then they give you a bottle of champagne to celebrate the big event. You pretty much need to know you're going to get the right answer. Cost $1,000 to do that. So if she says no, let's just be friends. You just bought a $1,000 bottle of champagne. The Tribune Tower over here on the other side of the boat, 1923 building by Raymond Hood and John Mead Howells of New York. If you have a chance after the tour, it's just the other side of Michigan Avenue. If you walk around the base of that building, there are stones and artifacts from famous places all over the world embedded in the base of that building. You can walk around and touch a piece of the Taj Mahal, you can touch a piece of the pyramids, the Berlin Wall. There's literally hundreds of them. I mean, you can walk around the base of that building for an hour and look at and actually touch all these very famous places in history. Just the other side of the boat here, on the right side of the boat, that tall white building behind the Hyatt, the brown building, but the tall white building with the real strong vertical stripes, that's the Aon Center. It started out in 1979 as the Standard Oil building. It was originally clad in white Carrara marble slabs. Beautiful building. Problem was that they cut these slabs just a half-inch thick. So after 9 of Chicago's really harsh winters, really hot summers, these things started to break. They started to separate from the building. Real problem if you're walking around down on Randolph Street back then. Everybody was looking up all the time. They tried everything they could do to get these things to stay on the building. Nothing worked. Finally, in 1990, they made the big decision to reclad the entire building. Took them 2 years, cost $80 million, almost as much as it did to build the building in the first place. But they had to take off 43,000 slabs of white marble, replaced it with 43,000 slabs of white North Carolina granite that was cut 1 3/4 inches thick this time. People sometimes wonder where all that marble went that they took off. It used to be the Standard Oil building. If you go to the BP refinery in Whiting, Indiana now, there's acres and acres of beautiful white landscaping mulch. They basically ground it up and turned it into landscaping mulch. Real quickly here though too, right behind the Swiss Hotel, you see that tall building that has the wavy balconies right in the gap there? That's the Aqua building. It's the tallest building designed by a female-owned architectural firm. Jeannie Gang is a wonderful Chicago architect. Her firm is called Studio Gang. 2009, when that building was completed, it won an award for the most beautiful residential building in the world. It's not an exaggeration. It is really a beautiful building. It's just a few blocks away. If you find yourself in the neighborhood, just take a minute, walk to the base of that building and take a look at it. But also, if you stand outside the building and take a picture looking straight up those wavy balconies, it turns out to be really, really cool picture. And you got a beautiful day here with some blue sky and a few clouds, so it'll turn out really great. But Jeannie Gang, same architect that did that building, also did the building right over here that is going under construction right now. This is going to be called the Wanda Vista Tower. It'll probably take another 3 years for this thing to get finished, but when it's done, it'll be the third tallest building in Chicago. All these residential buildings you see over here, part of a really beautiful Chicago area neighborhood called Lakeshore East. If you were here 25 years ago, though, this was a big 9-hole urban golf course. And if you've been to Chicago in the wintertime, we don't play any golf here in the wintertime. Ground's frozen solid, ice, snow, sleet, you name it. Horrible weather, a lot of wind. So this really prime, really expensive piece of real estate was just sitting dormant for 6 or 7 months out of every year. So it has been put to much better use as a beautiful residential area. As I said, we're heading towards the lake right now. We got a couple minutes just to talk about the river that we're on, because the Chicago River is very unique. It's one of the few rivers in the world that has actually had the direction of its flow changed. It used to flow in the same direction that we're going right now, towards the lake. Problem was, in the 1800s, this was also the sewer for Chicago. So literally everything that Chicagoans didn't want ended up in this river. Horribly contaminated, horribly polluted. Caught on fire in 5 separate locations during the Great Chicago Fire. That's how bad it was. The real problem, though, was that it emptied out into Lake Michigan, and that's where we got our drinking water from. So Chicagoans are drinking all this horribly polluted water. In the 1840s, we actually lost 10% of the population to cholera and typhoid from drinking all this stuff. 1880s, there was another cholera outbreak. They decided that they had to do something about this water. Now, if it was today, we would just say, let's stop polluting the river, problem would pretty much go away. Back then, they didn't think that way. They came up with the idea of making the river go the opposite direction, away from the lake. Basically, dumping all this dirty water into the Gulf of Mexico rather than into Lake Michigan. They dug a big canal. They connected the south branch of this river to the Des Plaines River. The Des Plaines River runs in the opposite direction. It connects to the Illinois River and then the Mississippi and then ultimately out to the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico, of course, is at sea level. We're about 570 feet above sea level, so of course water runs downhill. Took them 8 years to dig this canal, but on January 2nd of 1900, they tore down the temporary berm, the water flowed into the canal, met up with the Des Plaines River, like magic, like a great big siphon, started pulling the river in the opposite direction. So from that day on, the river flows from east to west rather than west to east. Everybody in Chicago really happy, all that dirty water wasn't going in the lake anymore. Folks in St. Louis, not happy with us at all. They were getting all of our dirty water if they were downstream. They sued us. Incredibly, we won the lawsuit. We could continue to send our dirty water down there. Trial was held in Chicago. But there were other people there were not happy too. The other 3 states that border Lake Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana, they were saying, now that the lake is feeding the river, we're taking way too much water out of Lake Michigan. We're actually making the lake levels drop. So they sued us as well. That lawsuit took 37 years to get completed. It actually went all the way to the Supreme Court. When it was all over, though, Chicago lost. We had to figure out a way to restrict how much water we took out of Lake Michigan. Yeah, the result of that lawsuit is right in front of us, and we're going to be turning here in just a minute, but it's the Chicago Harbor Lock. We built a lock, an actual physical separation between the lake and the river. The lake level is about 5 feet higher, actually sometimes 6 feet higher than the river. So every time a boat transits from the lake into the river, that lock releases about 800,000 gallons of lake water into the river. It's really the only source of water there is for this river. It's what comes through the lock here, and we're going to be turning just so you'll see it. It's that gray structure over there, those gray doors. So every time you want to go out into the lake, you actually have to pass through that lock. Every time you want to go from the lake into the river, you have to go through that lock too. Looks like there's some people in there that are coming this way. So actually they're probably not going to open the doors just yet. But when they do, if they do while we're still here, it's kind of interesting because the water in that lock is, again, about 5 feet higher than what the lake water is, or what the river water is. So when they crack those doors open, you see the water coming through the crack in the doors is about that much higher. Anyway, we're gonna sit here for a minute or so. If you want to get some good shots of the skyline, feel free to move around, but as Captain Josh said, please don't stand on the chairs or stand on the benches.